You're listening to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, aimed at helping photographers learn how to make the leap from amateur to pro. Hello and welcome to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, a joint effort brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University. This is Shamira Young, and I'm joined by my co-host, the one, the only Skip Cohen. Skip, how are you?
I think Sheila would say, thank God there's only one. Yes, I am the one and only. I'm good. I'm good. Hurricane season has started in Florida, so if things get strange during this podcast, it's because we're in the middle of a thunderstorm. But it's just a storm, and everybody hits the panic button. But that's not going to keep me from being part of a great podcast that I am really looking forward to. So if you're good with it, Shamira, I think I'll go ahead and do an intro of our guest today.
I'm excited to get started. Go for it.
All right, let's do it. Just to remind everybody, Mind Your Own Business, the foundation of Mind Your Own Business started out and still is. It's all about sharing ideas to help you build a stronger business and, for that matter, a better life as an artist. Now, this is such a fun podcast for me today because we've got one of my very best buddies in the spotlight. Kevin A. Gilligan joins us, and he's an artist. He's an educator, a presenter, a writer. He's a great dad and husband. And we first met through Tamron at least 10 years ago. But here's something that's really fun for me and a tribute to the internet and cyberspace and the phone system. For 8 of those years, while our friendship kept growing, we'd never met in person. But that never slowed us down from these long conversations about photography and family and life and the industry. And through all that time, this friendship just kept growing. Now, there's so much in his life and business that everyone is going to be able to relate to today. First, he's got a day job as a full-time practicing attorney. Second, when he and I first met, his primary focus was landscape. But today, his skill set has become so diverse, he's shooting a little of everything, including a portrait project that he shared with the public at an exhibition 2 years ago. Third, one of the very best posts ever shared on the Skip Cohen University blog was Kevin's 3-part series on how to put together your own exhibition. So there are so many of you over the years who have considered ways to show your work, and Kevin's post had just about all the answers. So today we're going to talk about finding balance between careers, the importance of education, diversity in your skill set, doing your own exhibition maybe, and relationship building is going to jump in there, and who knows what else is going to come up. So, buddy, it is a kick to catch up to you today in cyberspace. Welcome to Mind Your Own Business.
Wow, Skip, thank you for that fantastic introduction. It's very kind of you. I'm really happy to be here. Shamira, thank you very much for having me as well. And let's get down to business.
Kevin, we were thrilled to have you.
I'm glad you liked it because you did send me a check for it. So much appreciated.
The secrets come out.
Actually, it wasn't a check. It was a bottle of wine, but that's okay.
That's true. I did send you a bottle of wine recently.
Yeah,
that's true. But that was before this came up, so I didn't know at the time.
Oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a good one. Oh my goodness, Kevin, this is awesome. Looking at your work, it's inspiring, and I'm excited to dive and dig deep into you and your business. But first, let's kick it off with our favorite first question. Tell us a bit about your background. I know Skip went into it a little bit, but give us that personal touch and tell us how you got started and, ended up doing what you're doing today.
Thank you. Great question. I grew up in New York, and I had always been interested in photography and art museums, et cetera. But I kind of lost touch with photography when I was in law school, and about halfway through my professional career, I was in a place where I was spending a lot of time in tough neighborhoods and not seeing a lot of things that were very pretty related to my work. And I needed to get back into something to kind of fill my soul up again. And so I got back into landscape photography. And so it started with going out to the ocean and shooting and being outside and seeing beautiful things to kind of, supplement, other things going on in my life and bring some joy in there. And then actually I tried to turn a bad situation into a good one when in the 2008 financial crisis, I started getting furloughed in my job, as many of us got hit with that crisis. And so I started turning my love of photography into a business back then, and haven't looked back since then.
Wow, 2008. That's an interesting time to get started.
Yeah, I guess looking back, a lot of people said that's a terrible time to start with your business. But for me, I was like, well, my income's getting cut in one place, and I have this other interest that I love, photography. So, let me give this a shot. And so, probably against what a lot of people would say business-wise, I did it, and I, started, shooting and selling my images, and making myself available to shoot images for people and marketing, and that's kind of how it started there.
There's a great line that goes, I do it because I want to. I do it because I can. I do it because you told me I couldn't do it. and that's kind of the way I felt in 2009 when I left WPPI and started my own consulting company. I mean, it's interesting because the last thing you were thinking about was, God, what a terrible time to start a new business.
Right.
Yeah, it was also the best time and a necessary time to start a new business. So it's kind of a real catch-22 for people when they're trying to figure out, well, God, why did he give that up?
I think if you're really passionate about something and you really love it, then there's no bad time. And there's always going to be ways to do it. And there's always going to be ways to move forward and get your name out there and get work. And if nothing else, kind of like it's almost like a big circle again with COVID. This year, obviously, it's been incredibly tough, all over the world. And, you could build up your skill set. You could do other things to prepare yourself to move forward, when the clouds kind of part and there's opportunities again. So, I don't think there's any bad time to start if you're passionate about it.
No, it's true. All right, so let's get right into one of the biggest topics and challenges for so many photographers out there today, and that's finding balance between your day job and your passion for photography. And it's not unusual. In fact, my guess is that 50% of the industry are made up of part-time photographers. And I don't think that has changed in the last 30 or 40 years. It's always been that way, going back to the very early film days. There were so many part-time photographers out there that were primarily came out of the educational world and were teachers, because teachers were off in the summer. It was a logical connection to photograph during wedding season. And there were so many photographers out there that were taking advantage of that time to create some additional income. So the challenge today is just the same as it was then. It's finding balance. Kevin, what are some of the things you found work for you to maintain your sanity and balance when you've got two different challenges like that and two very different careers?
Well, you've identified a really, really important question and point. There's many parts to it. From my perspective, number one is I think it's really important to get input and have a discussion with the people that you're close to around you. If you have a partner, you're married, you have kids, whoever it is that is really important to you time-wise, to have a discussion with them about, what are their needs? What is a reasonable amount of time for you to be working on this? And I think you have to really do an assessment about what your ability to meet all your needs is if you want to keep those relationships happy. And I do. It's very important to me that my wife is happy and my kids are happy. So I think about that, and I think that's really important. And in terms of balance, the funny thing is that for me, photography, it's not like a second job. It's still something that I love and I'm passionate about. And so it's something that I want to do. And I think when you have a full-time job and other responsibilities, what I find is that, some weeks I'm doing a lot of work in photography and some weeks maybe I'm not doing any, very little. Kind of go with the ebb and flow with that. And, someone said to me, Kevin, how do you get all this done? I have one friend that says to me all the time, you're a full-time lawyer, you do photography, you do martial arts, you do other things. How do you get all this done? And I say, I plan things out weeks ahead of time, and I give myself extra time to get stuff done. And if people don't respect my time and cancel on me, late or whatever, then, I might have to cut those people out. I have to be particular with my time, and I have to be, not rigid, but I have to stick to that and plan out so that I can do things. And I think that kind of planning is really important.
There's another piece of this that for our audience out there that they need to know too. Kevin's wife is a phenomenal pianist, and has her own business with 2 grand pianos in their living room and has a waiting list. What is it, a year now?
2 years. She wrote a book, The 2-Year Wait List. Yeah.
Okay. So she's got a waiting list. Yeah, she's got a waiting list for 2 years, and is an author, and she's got her own business there. And I think you hit on something about keeping the people closest to you plugged in to what's going on. But there's another piece that you kind of glossed over. You are a fanatic about taking time for yourself, whether it's hitting the ocean to surf, whether it's martial arts, whether it's just out. I mean, I don't know how many times I've called you and you're out on a walk or a jog, because you do maintain that balance. It's not just plugging everybody else in. It's making sure that you're plugged into the things that you personally need to just feel good and have the energy you want to do everything.
Yes, I think that kind of self-care, especially as we've seen this last year, is really important. Where, whatever it is that you need to do. I mean, for me, if I don't get in, about an hour of exercise a day minimum, I'm not a happy person, and my family's not happy. I'm not happy. It's not good. And I'm lucky that my wife is really supportive, and she's like, "You need to leave and go do whatever you need to do for an hour to get some exercise and come back less cranky."
Well, I'm the same way. Only difference is that if I don't think about exercising for an hour, I just don't feel good. Oh, the word is procrastination, everybody.
In summary, I think, checking in with the people around you, planning and ahead of time to give yourself enough time, and trying to find that balance of what you need is the way to go. But you do have to give some thought to it, and what are your priorities? And I have a little mantra, and I thought to myself, like, what are my priorities? I was reevaluating a couple of years ago, and I thought about it. And my priorities are family first, number 1, 2 is be a professional, and 3 is have fun. That's kind of how I try to calibrate things.
There's a certain purposefulness. Is that a word? Purposefulness? I think so.
Sure.
It is now.
There we go. You're very purposeful. There we go, Kevin, in how you live your life. It's like a holistic approach, and I like that you're fostering your personal relationships with your family. And you mentioned the ebb and flow between balancing different careers. And as I'm looking at your bio, I am just stunned at the exhibitions that you've had, and you've won awards, you're teaching lessons, you're doing portraits, special events, sports photography. You're doing a lot. And I'm curious if we could, just to kind of switch gears, because it's clear that you have a lot of connections that you've built over the years. And I'd kind of like to go back in time a little bit to when you were first starting out. You mentioned back in 2008, you kind of took the leap. How did you begin to gain momentum, and specifically as you gain momentum with your business, how did the role of relationship building with clients come into play? I hope I asked that in a non-confusing way. Does that make sense?
You did. It's a big question with many parts to it, so I'll try and break it down. How did I do it? Well, I think the first thing was to follow the passion of what I really liked and to want to get good at it. And so I try, I'm a person who likes to research things. So I talked to people, I would go to exhibits, I would talk to people that were professionals in the field and get to know them and try to study the masters. And someone said to me, study the people who've come before you. There's a lot of people who came before you, and learn it. So, I would do research on, who were the great landscape photographers and people who I like Sebastião Salgado, or, Michael Kenna, and, look at their work and buy their books and see their exhibitions and, learn from them. And then relationship building is really crucial. I try to say thank you as much as I can. I try to be humble. And in terms of relationship building and learning, one thing I'm not, if I have one superpower, it's that I'm not afraid to fail spectacularly, and I do fail spectacularly and publicly at times. And so I will go up to people that I don't know and say, "Hey, I'd like to learn from you. I'll carry your bags. I'll take a day off my day job, and I'll carry your bags, and just will you teach me a little?" And that's what I've done. I've gone to different professionals and said, "I'll show up, and you don't have to pay me, and I just want to learn." people if I respect their work. I try to do that. And then just saying thank you, a lot, I think is really important, and showing gratitude, being humble.
And you are. And it does make it makes it really fun to work with you, because we've been involved in a few different projects now. But that's a perfect segue into the diversity in your skill set, because you did start out when you and I first met, and again it was through Tamron, which you still shoot nonstop today.
Tamron has been great, and I am so grateful to them for their support and the quality and value proposition, their lenses. I mean, I love their stuff. They've been great to work with.
Well, when our friendship started, you were primarily doing the landscape. Talk about the transition into portraiture, not only into you wanting to do it, but how were you finding, where were you finding the time to practice? Where was the inspiration, and where did you hope to go with this? Because the project you did that I was involved in, and
Developing Men.
Thank you, Developing Men, was 100% a portrait project with individual formal portraits together with more of an environmental portrait, combining those two with each person that you had featured in the exhibit.
Right. So the transition, that's a really good question. How did it happen? I started looking at a lot of different portraits and people who are doing them. And I think I kind of fell in love with the lighting, and I was just really curious about it. I love really good lighting is really important, whether you're shooting landscapes or whether you're shooting people. It doesn't matter. You have to have beautiful lighting to have something that is attractive to the eye and interesting. And I tend to favor dark and moody landscapes, and I tend to favor dark and moody portraits. But it's the contrast and having that in there. And so I started looking at various portraits and the lighting. I was like, how did they do that? How do you control that? And I realized that I didn't have that skill set. And I was like, I want to figure that out. How does that work? And so I volunteered to, hold bags for people and go on shoots. And I read voraciously. I got as many books as I could. I took workshops, and I paid to take workshops from people. And then I just experimented. I created a little studio in my garage and just would experiment and have people come over and practice the lighting and sign up for webinars. And I just wanted to learn it. And so I kept doing it. And it just took, I'm still learning, obviously. It takes years and years and years to become really good at it. But after about, 9 years of really working on it part-time, I felt competent. Not expert, but competent. I have high standards for what I expect in my output. And so the Developing Men portrait session came along. There were a number of things that came together. Did you want to talk about that now?
Yeah, throw that in, because that's a perfect example of you taking the portrait specialty and weaving it in and absolutely taking no prisoners.
Well, thank you. It's the Developing Men series was I've done about 30 exhibitions now. I've had 3 solo shows. That was my 3rd solo show, and I photographed 15 men, 2 portraits each, 1 formal and 1 environmental of each. So we had 30 portraits of men that I did over about 18 months. And I traveled to, I think it was 9 cities, 2 coasts. Tamron was great to help sponsor that. And I was so glad you were in it and you helped me. And it's a contemporary examination of male friendship, masculinity, isolation, community, and legacy. And it's a mouthful, but there were a lot of concepts that were floating around in my head for a while. I don't know how you guys work, but for me, I have a lot of concepts that float around in my head, and then they kind of get pulled together into a string. And so I wanted to do this project. So there were 3 parts to it. There were portraits, there was a written word, and there was a video. And so we photographed and did portraits of everyone. I had written word on my thoughts, it's on my website, Developing Men, about those concepts, and then interviewing men about these concepts and what they thought about masculinity and community and isolation and legacy. And there were a number of reasons. I turned 52 this year. My father passed when I was 52, and so that was sort of confronting my own mortality and my brother. I was fighting stage 4 cancer, and unfortunately lost that battle last year after 3 years of fighting quite bravely. And so there were a lot of questions in my head about, what kind of parent do I want to be? What kind of father do I want to be? What's my, what does masculinity mean to be when you're a father of a boy and a girl? And what does that mean to pass that on? Or how does that affect your kids? And what's your legacy going to be? So I wanted to explore this with 15 men that I respected and believed could have a conversation that was intelligent and thoughtful about it. And so surprisingly, Skip, you made the cut, but it was really good.
Oh, I would have been disappointed in you if you hadn't taken that shot.
You were great. And it turned out really well. I learned a ton. The lighting and the portraits, I'm super happy with the written word. I'm super happy with the video. I learned a ton. I made a lot of mistakes. I learned about audio and recording, and I'm much better at it than I was 2 years ago. And so it was an incredible learning experience. And at the end, I had an exhibition where we put it up in the South Bay Artist Collective in a gallery for a week. And it was just great.
Well, the next place to go from talking about that is go into the top 2 or 3 things that people need to consider if they're going to do their own exhibition, because that blog post, and we'll have the link to that with the podcast, because that 3-part blog post really took people into incredible detail, even down to the temperature of the lights you needed to have.
So you want me to take 3 hours of our podcast and give you 2 things? Is that what you're asking me?
Well, no, but if you're going to take 3 hours, give us 10 things.
Okay.
No, go back farther. Maybe it's just what people need to consider. Everybody says, it's like people that say, I really want to do a book someday, but they never sit down and actually think through what's the purpose of the book.
Sure.
So
sure.
what are some of the key things that people have to consider? We don't have to go into the 3 most important things, but what do they have to consider when they start thinking about, okay, I'm really going to do this now?
Sure.
Where do you go from there?
And of course, I'm just teasing. But I would definitely encourage people, if you've been shooting for a while, I would encourage people wholeheartedly to print your work and frame it and show it, because it will make you better. You'll look at things in a different way. You will learn about printing. You will learn about framing. You can learn about how to put things up. You can learn about marketing. There's a million things that you're going to learn in the process of putting on a show that are going to make you better and more conversant. And it gives you some social credibility too. People want to say, oh, you've had exhibitions. Okay, you've been there, so you're selling your work and you want to raise your prices. It's like, yeah, I put in the work. I did shows and I put it together and I understand what that means. And you can have a different kind of conversation with people. But I think the key thing is to decide that you have 1, 2, 10, 20 images, whatever the number is, that you want to put up, and learn about printing. And if you don't know how to print, go to some pros, talk to some people who are really good. Go to Bay Photo or go to Whitewall or go someplace and get it printed. Learn how to calibrate your monitors and your printers. Learn how to set up a show. The other thing that you and I have talked a lot about, Skip, is partnering with people. Partner with people who know what they're doing, who've maybe done it before, and you could, share the money, share the cost, share the time, and learn from each other in terms of putting on things and sharing marketing expenses, or sharing, renting a gallery, or sharing, the expenses for a wine or whatever you're going to have, on the night that you're going to serve. There's ways to make it less expensive, but it's really worth it, and it will make you a better photographer to do it.
Well, that's one more segue. Just explain what the South Bay Artist Collective is.
Sure. The South Bay Artist Collective, I live in the South Bay area of Los Angeles. It's about an hour from downtown LA. And we have 30, or it might be up to 35 artists now who are painters and photographers and sculptors and mixed media artists who work together. We pay monthly dues for a gallery. We work together. We market. We put on shows. We support each other, and it's a great way for artists to interact and get to know the artist community. We help each other out in a lot of ways. Whether it's here's a lead on a place to get a good deal in printing. Here's a lead on a place that needs some art for sale. Maybe you could sell it, and just to be exposed to other creatives. Have other people around. It's really it kind of helps fill your cup. in a good way.
Now, for everybody listening, what I love about this is that this is a partnership between a group of artists where the finished product is having a place to call home, to be able to show your work, to be able to do exhibitions. I know at times there are multiple artists that will have gallery shows at the collective, and it gives people an opportunity to see your work, but then you've also got the ability to network and cross-promote, or not necessarily cross-promote, but you've got cross-exposure with the audience that's coming in to see a sculptor's work. At the same time, your work as a photographer might be on display. And it's just such a great partnership. You know, you don't have to do everything out there solo, everybody. You can look for ways to partner and share those costs that Kevin's talking about. But this is one that I love because it's ongoing. It's a full-time commitment. And when you've got 30 plus people paying dues to a location, to a building, to be able to have something that functions as a gallery, it's something that most people would never do on their own, or for that matter, most people couldn't afford on their own.
Absolutely, and we've started expanding. It's in Hermosa Beach. It's at the Resin Gallery in Hermosa Beach, California, and we've also started providing classes for kids too. So that's a big part of what we do, whether arts classes and photography classes and other things, and some classes that sort of blend awareness and other ways to learn about the arts with actually practicing the arts and mindfulness. So we've got some really cool classes that we do to support the community, interact with the community, and bring value to that community.
Oh my goodness, Kevin, I'm just a fly on the wall right now. This is amazing. So I'm looking through your exhibits, your publications, and it's downright impressive how many installations you've had over the years.
Thank you.
And,
very kind.
I've got so many questions. And yet we're coming to the end of this interview. We're going to have you back. I mean, just the topic of putting on your own exhibition, especially for those creative artists out there who have never done that. It's such a huge topic in and of itself.
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge. And you got to do it. You just got to go for it. You get better by doing it. I would love to come back and have a conversation with you about it anytime.
Absolutely. I'm over here speaking for the both of us. I'm sure Skip doesn't mind having you come back on because
I don't want him. I don't want him back.
Oh, well, that's too bad, Skip.
After we're done here, that's it. He's finished.
It's over.
Oh.
Hey, can we? I want to jump in on just one thing here, although I think Shamira had some direction she was going to go in. You did a stunning portrait of Noreen at a Steinway in the Steinway store in Beverly Hills?
Yes.
Talk about that relationship in terms of, I mean, here you were photographing her for, it was for you guys, right? The client was Noreen.
It's a couple of things. Yeah, it was primarily for Noreen. We're also, we have some Steinways, and Steinway's been really good to us, and so we took some images for them, and we're actually preparing a proposal for Steinway magazine to try and get it published in there too. So we'll see. Ask me in a couple of months how that goes. Noreen's going to write an article for them on the type of piano business that she runs and music teachers and Steinways for that, and then we're going to pitch something. So maybe it'll end up in that magazine. But it was also, just to have an heirloom. We're really big into having, a few nice prints to have and put up on the wall of us at various times in our life. Because, you're never as young as you are today.
Boy, isn't that true?
Yes. I hope you don't mind, Skip. I want to sneak in one more question before we ask our favorite final question. So it's interesting, Kevin, that you've been a judge on a number of national photography competitions. And so from the standpoint of a judge, what have you noticed that, how do I phrase this? Because I'm not trying to tear anyone down, and we are all works in progress. But
that's true. That is true.
Yes, myself so much included. But skill set wise, I guess image quality wise even, what areas have you noticed that photographers are lacking in? As a
Ooh,
judge? What
ooh,
has stood out to you?
ooh. That's tough. It, it it also depends on what level we're talking about. It's a really good question, right? I think I suspect you're coming from a place where you're saying, what have you noticed that we can help our photographers who are listening to improve what they're doing, right?
Right. Not
I
trying to
suspect
pick on anybody, but
Right.
yes.
I suspect that's where you're coming from. So there's different levels, not surprisingly, of photography competitions and expertise. Right, the same. You're going to judge something different if someone's been working for as a photographer for 5 years and someone's been doing it for 30 years. There's different
Mm-hmm.
levels, and people are going to have more or less experience. But at sort of the beginning level, I think composition is everything. I have a good friend, Victor Hugo Zayas, who's a wonderful painter. And, I photographed him and some of his work and for the Laguna Art Museum. And he always says to me, Kevin, composition, composition, composition. What about the lighting? No, he's like, composition, composition, composition. It's all composition. And in some ways he's right. If it doesn't matter if the lighting is great or everything is right, but the composition is bad, or off, it's not going to work. I think having some sort of leading lines into the image, with composition and lighting, I think is really important. That grabs your eye. Another friend of mine is a really good photographer. She's great. She always tells me that your eyes have to have a way into the image, and so think about how if it's a landscape, for example, you're traveling, your eyes are working into maybe a foreground and then into the midsection and then maybe into a sky. How are your eyes going to travel? And hopefully you can create that with composition, but you might also be able to assist that with lighting and dodging and burning in post.
I want to,
Composition. Wow.
yeah, composition, but I want to define it one step further for everybody. If you're entering prints in competition, and this should also apply to your own online galleries, you want to only show what I call wow prints. Now, a wow print is a print that's so good, it's the only one you would have to show to get hired. If you meet that qualification, when you look at your own work, hey, this is really good, or, oh, yeah, it's good, but everybody has the same shot. And this applies to portrait artists. It applies to wedding albums. It's across the board. You want that image that leaves people with that, sucking all the air out of the universe sound when they take a look at it.
That's a really good
there you
point,
go.
Skip.
There's a point of totally useless wisdom from yours truly.
No, not at all.
Oh,
You're
that's
right.
great.
It's hard as artists. We want to share our latest and greatest work, and we love this for one reason or another. But really on your website, you should narrow it down to your best. You're absolutely right, and it's hard to cull like that. To cull your own work is hard sometimes.
Yep.
Yes, it is. Oh my goodness. Oh, Kevin, this has been amazing. And I always say this, but the time passes so fast. I'm always sad when we get to the end of these interviews. But I do want to make sure and get to our favorite final question. And it's so relevant now, especially with so many photographers trying to kind of restart things after COVID. And then there's the round of people who have maybe been considering photography, getting into it. And now as the economy is opening up, maybe they're willing to kind of take that jump. So for those listeners who are just starting out in photography, what advice would you give them as far as getting started? What's the one most important thing?
Oh, do I have to give one?
If two come to mind, go for it.
All right. I'll be short. I'll put it this way. I know we're short on time. I would say, follow your passion. If you're passionate about one area of photography and you love it, follow that, because it'll be more interesting and in some ways easier for you. The other pieces that I would say are study the masters. People have come before you. Read about it. Go to museums. Find out who the greatest people are in the type of photography that you're interested in, and buy their books. Patronize their stuff. Follow them. Buy their books. Ask questions, and be humble. Volunteer your time to work with other people and help other people along the way. Those are probably the top three that I would have.
That's perfect. That's the perfect
Good
way to
stuff.
wrap up this interview. Oh my
Good
goodness.
stuff.
Yes. Kevin, where can people check you out online?
Thank you for asking. My website is www.photosbykag, PHOTOSBYKAG.com. And you can also find me at Photos by Kag on Insta and Twitter, etc. And
Perfect.
LinkedIn. Yep.
We'll make sure and include those links in the show notes for sure. And Skip, where can folks get a hold of you?
I think everybody out there that listens to this podcast can lip sync with me here now all together. Everything I write is always at skipcohenuniversity.com. My email is skip@mei500.com. We would love to get your feedback and suggestions on future guests, and on Twitter and on Facebook. Nothing creative here, just my name. You'll find me as Skip Cohen, and it's just great getting feedback from all of you guys out there. So let us know what you're thinking and what you'd like us to talk about next. And as I always ask again, Shamira, where do they go to find you?
Yes, folks can send me an email at shamira@photofocus.com. That's my first name, CHAMIRA @photofocus.com. I've got a handful of emails, but they all go to the same place. So you can hit me up there with questions, ideas. As Skip mentioned, we love getting feedback from our listeners because it shapes how we move forward in this show, with this show, and we are all in this together. Kevin, thank you again. This has been awesome.
Just really good stuff, buddy.
Thank you so much. The two of you are both so gracious. You know, if you don't know these guys offline, they're just as gracious in person when you talk to them as they are on the show. There's no phony baloney here. These are two of the nicest people you're going to meet. And you guys are so gracious with your expertise and sharing and helping people. So thank you. I'm privileged to be here. Thank you.
All right, I'll rip up the check you sent me for your intro. I won't. I was post-dated anyway, which would bother me.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much. And we want to thank our listeners for joining us as well. Please tell your friends about this podcast, especially if they have the burning desire to bring their businesses up to the next level. We are all in this together. We look forward to having you with us next time on the Mind Your Own Business podcast, brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University.